Oh, chega aí. Deixa eu mostrar um negócio aqui pra vocês. São as imagens daquele segurança que foi morto mês passado lá em... Como é?
Casa Amarela.
Aqui.
Essa imagem que era uma segurança?
É, do prédio da frente. Tá vendo? Aí o carro passa e ele nem... Acho que os caras já fizeram isso pra ver como é que tava a situação, né? Acharam que ele tava armado, assim, né? Aí ele volta. E agora só na cabeça dele, viu?
My name is Kleber Mendonça Filho. I come from Recife in Brazil, northeastern Brazil. And that's where I shot Neighbouring Sounds, which is my first feature, narrative feature. I had done a documentary before. Originally, I wanted it to be a straightforward family melodrama, but it turned out to be more like a thriller. And this is something that I found out when I started showing the film. And I've been learning with each showing of the film that it behaves more like a thriller than what I thought I had made, and I think that's great. I worked as a film critic for 12 years, and I also program a festival, which is the Janela Internacional de Cinema in Recife. It's in November. We're going up to our 5th edition now. And I also program a cinema, but I'm not sure those roles really have a direct effect on directing a film or writing a screenplay. I think it's a very organic process, and you set out to make a film and you just make the film the best way you can, and the film will always be what it wants to be, and it's not like you have the film critic telling you things on the set. You just make the films with the actors and with all the people you work with, and yeah, and that's what really matters in the end. I think when you make a film, and then you have to really go back in terms of, you know, the national panorama in terms of Brazilian cinema, which is where I come from. Maybe an Australian filmmaker would probably think in terms of Australia when he or she makes a film. But when I set out to make the film, I wanted to make the kind of film that I'm not really seeing in Brazilian cinema right now. I understood that it had very realistic elements from, you know, Brazilian society. But at the same time, and this is something that came up in script stage, the film naturally gained some elements from genre cinema and from classic cinema narrative, shooting it widescreen without really using handheld cameras. It's just very classic in a way, so mixing a very realistic story and setting and characters with some elements from classic narrative storytelling, this is something that I wanted to do, and it just came up naturally during the process also, not only in script, but during when I was shooting the film. The health of the industry is quite good, I would say, because there is quite a lot of money being given to film production. But looking at Brazilian production, of course you do get some very interesting films, especially from a new generation, that I would say it's my generation, the ones who were making short films even 3 years ago, 10 years ago. And now we are beginning to make our first feature films. But there is something that I dislike, which is Brazilian cinema has this, it seems to be addicted to telling stories about the other, about other social situations and other social communities which are not really the milieu of the filmmakers themselves. And I really think that the best films and the best literature or music comes when you talk about yourself. So most Brazilian filmmakers are bourgeois or middle class or upper middle class, but there are very few films which actually focus on that layer of society. Ultimately, if you're you know, telling stories about social situations you don't really know about. I think the tendency is for them to sound phony, or, you know, it lacks heart, I think. So that's my main criticism in terms of, you know, a panorama of Brazilian production. And this is what I try to do with this film, is telling stories about people I have met and things I have seen where I live, because the film was shot in the neighborhood where I actually live, on the street where I live. Being in Sydney, this is my very first time in Australia. I had never been to this side of the world. I've always been fascinated by Australia because I lived in England in my teens, and living in England was, you know, I used to get a lot of Australia through England. The best thing that could come out of this, being in competition, is probably getting the film distributed in Australia. That would be fantastic. And yeah, I just hope that the film makes a connection here with an Australian audience. And I think some of the themes in the film, turns out that they are very universal. That's what I have learned over the last 5-6 months, showing the film outside Brazil.
Infinite Stories, one film festival.